Hey, everybody, this is Jimmy Tingle. Welcome back to another episode of the Meet the Candidates series for Cambridge City Council and Cambridge School Committee 2025. Our next guest is John Hanratty. He is a second-time candidate for Cambridge City Council. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Good to
much
be
for
here.
being here. So, John, I know a little bit about you because I interviewed you a couple years ago, but please introduce yourself to the voters of Cambridge and tell us who you are, something about your background, your experience, why you're running for Cambridge City Council.
Okay, so I've lived here in Cambridge for 35 years and have started a number of tech companies around the area. And so 6 years ago, I got involved with politics here and mainly in community advocacy. And so I got involved, and over time, I've helped form a couple groups, the Cambridge Streets for All, as well as the Neighborhood 9 Coalition. And that's just from a recognition that we don't have, the neighborhoods don't have the voice they need. They need to be represented, and people need to be informed in the neighborhoods of what's going on, because it's very hard to navigate the city with all the things. It's a very busy city with a lot of things that politically that can affect you. But so it's hard to organize the neighborhoods to get together around an issue and then mobilize them to make a good case for changing it. So my background before that was in tech, and so what we did there is we would go out, we'd raise some money, we would bring a product that's completely new to market and a new concept, and we would spend a lot of time with stakeholders and experts, so say 2 years, trying to figure out what the product was and what the benefits were of the product, and really quantify what the benefits were to see what was the most important. And so through that process, we then go and bring the product to our first customer, and inevitably it would suck. They would say, bring it back. It doesn't work. And so we'd iterate on that and continue to do it and until we had something that was really good. And I think that translates into something the city could do. No one can get it right the first time. As much planning and thinking you do about it, and even talking to constituents. You have to be able to look at this thing and decide, well, we're gonna do this. The goals were these benefits. Are we making it? No. Okay, then let's adjust. And so I'd like to bring some of that expertise of, let's define the benefits around, an ordinance or a policy, and then we can measure against those to say, did we do what we wanted to do? So that's where I come from. I've been here 30 years. My son went to Cambridge Public Schools, and then while I was working, and then as I shifted over to public life, I spent a lot more time with the neighborhoods, small businesses, and those types of things. The reason I'm running is I realized that, in order for us to make progress, we need to change the council. And the council does not seem to be interested in neighborhoods. We seem to have a council that favors special interests over citizen input. And so trying to organize those inputs in the last 6 years and get and make change to the city, it's been very difficult. And so what we have to do is really start changing the council so that we can get more input from neighborhoods and citizens into the council.
Okay.
Some of the as I walk around, the number one issue right now is the upzoning. And so, you can't ignore that. But it was created to, with the goal of creating more density in the city. What the results are going to be are probably very different. And so what we're seeing is people are really concerned about 2-family homes being replaced by much more expensive 4 or 6-story buildings. In some cases, they can also put a 9-story building in, and that's very impactful for a neighborhood. And so really, that law, that ordinance and that zoning sort of, it really treats the middle class and the neighborhood as expendable, right? So we want to create more density, but we really don't care about the collateral damage. And it is it's moving the middle class out of neighborhoods because they're not going to be able to afford the new housing, and it's changing the neighborhoods themselves. Other issues,
Well, let me just
I'll
ask
just
you, in terms of,
yeah.
you mentioned the special interests getting more attention than the neighborhoods. For example, can you give us a couple of examples of some of the special interests you think that are really getting their getting more attention than the neighborhoods?
Well, I think, for zoning, it's, developers are involved. The ABC group is very vocal on their ideas around zoning. The cycling safety group is very vocal about bike lanes, but neither of them really have opinions on, open space or pedestrians or whether it's a destination neighborhood or it's a pleasant place to live. They're really worried about, the things that go between the lot lines and how high I can go and how much money I can make, or the bike lanes have to be where they are. And so parking, businesses and other things are ignored because they're kind of tunnel visioned on those things. So I think the council really has to be wise and be an arbitrator for the community. Really, you want to look at these things, and there's some good ideas that these groups have, but you have to weigh them against the other requirements and important issues around the neighborhoods of the residents and the things that they really need. And then you can work those together and come up with something that works for everybody. And I think so. So that's the issue with special interests. There's nothing wrong with advocating something strongly, but it can't be just taken in a vacuum. And it's really the city council's job to recognize the needs of the residents of the city and work those around those ideas if they're valid and good, and make sure we get a very livable city that treats everyone well.
Right. In terms of endorsements and things like that, have you been endorsed by other organizations or any organizations?
Yeah, the CCC endorsed me as well as the CARE housing,
What does
who's
CCC stand for?
Citizens Cambridge Citizens Coalition,
Okay.
I believe, and
Citizens.
CARE Housing,
Okay.
who's really focused on the new housing, but their first issue is around building. When you build towers or higher buildings, you're shading the solar panels that people have paid lots of money to install. So there are a lot of unintended consequences of building higher
Right.
by law.
Right. You had mentioned the bike folks, the cycling interest in the city. And I know all the candidates, I asked them what most of them anyway, it's housing, as you said, is number one. Bike lanes are big. In terms of the bike lanes, you think it's right where it is? Is this like where we should be, or should it be more bike lanes, or should they be less bike lanes, or what is your feeling on that? Or are we in that iteration phase where we have to see what works that you spoke of?
Yeah. So I haven't seen the city do an iteration unless they're really forced to at this point. And so, but I think, some people, I have a reputation of being on one side or the other on bike lanes. And the truth is I like bike lanes. I think they should be safe. And but they also should be part of the overall transportation infrastructure. And so where we get in trouble is where we squeeze bike lanes in. First, where we squeeze bike lanes into the tight spaces we have, it affects parking, it affects access to the side of the road, it affects travel lanes, number of travel lanes, and many other things. And so My interest is not in getting rid of bike lanes or prohibiting them. I support them, but I also think that we have to take in consideration the parking and other issues. I think for using parking as an example, if you're going to pull all the parking out or most of the parking out to put in bike lanes, the city should really figure out how to adjust, how to compensate for that for the residents that really need parking. And right now, you hear about Ringe Latin teachers coming at 5 a.m. to get a parking space because there aren't enough around, and then the neighborhood's fighting with them for their parking spaces. So, that's an issue. The second part of it is, if I'm going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on bike lanes, I want them to be safe. Now, when the ordinance was written, the only goal we had was 26 miles of bike lanes. And by God, we're going to get 26 miles of bike lanes. But are they going to be safe? And it turns out we lost 3 people last year, 3 deaths on bicycles. It was at intersections. And so we have to really go back and say, okay, it's time to iterate and figure out what the right answer is. Is it, to slow people down, bikes down at the intersections so that they can see better? There's infrastructure designs in Europe where they have a concrete block that makes them make a 45-degree turn before they can go through the intersection in major intersections. So they have to slow down, or speed bumps or something. I don't know what the answer is, but if bikes can slow down at major intersections, they have a better chance of stopping if somebody turns. So that, and there's other pieces to that whole thing. Is how do we make the bike lanes safer? And my study has said, it's the intersections. People get going real fast and they don't want to stop. And I can understand that, but yeah.
You said you had a couple more issues. Any other issues you'd like to talk about? How do you like to implement if you were elected?
Yeah, I think that, so there's the specific ones of zoning and bike lanes, which it seems to be was on the last election. But I think that, accountability we just touched on is how do we make decisions, and how do we measure our decisions? How can I help adjust those? Because that's where I have a lot of experience. So, like I said, you want to determine what the benefits you want to derive from these. Because I look at say, the neighborhood upzoning, and there's no description of what if you ask 5 people, you could have 5 answers what the benefits of it are. And if we don't agree on the benefits we're trying to get to, we can't measure them and then adjust.
Right.
I think the biggest one, I think, is
down. We got a couple of minutes left, so let's get to it. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So the last one is fiscal responsibility. So we've Kendall Square is going vacant, right? And we have 23% of the labs are now vacant. And so the value of those buildings is going to fall, and the taxes that they generate. So for a couple decades, every dollar that a resident paid, Kendall Square paid $2. And so if we lose that, it's going to be quite a difference. But with that money, we've gotten used to having a lot of money to spend, and we spent it. And in fact, the council said we don't have enough money. We're going to raise taxes 25% and they did over the last 3 years. And now we have an 8 to 9% tax hike coming for next year. And so with that falling tax revenue from the commercial side, from the federal government, from building permits, that burden is going to fall to the residents, and the residents are going to have to pay more, which increases housing for both homeowners and renters because it gets passed through. And so the council really needs to focus on priorities and pick the projects that are most important for the residents and for the people of the city, and then actually manage the process of making sure we get the most for our bucks.
Great. Thank you, John. So where can people learn more about you? Where can they find out more about John Hanratty and your campaign, and maybe get a yard sign, maybe volunteer, maybe make a large donation, how can they get involved?
Sure. I have a website. So it's hanratty4cambridge.com. And four is FOR, not the number four, but Hanratty, FOR, Cambridge.com. And on there, you can sign up for a sign, you can volunteer, you can make a donation, or just read the latest on the campaign.
Great. John, thanks a million for joining us today. I will see you hopefully on the campaign trail, and I wish you the best on November 4th. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for participating in our democracy.
There we go.